A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1, Shadows of the Past. The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed overhead as Valentina Cross adjusted her surgical mask, preparing for another night shift that would blur into dawn. 3 years had passed since she'd walked away from the supernatural world that had rejected her so completely, so publicly, so devastatingly. 3 years of hiding among humans, suppressing her wolf, pretending to be something she wasn't. But some wounds never truly heal, no matter how deep you bury them. At 22, Val had mastered the art of invisibility. She kept her head down, her shifts covered, her interactions minimal. The other nurses knew her as the quiet one who never called in sick, never complained about overtime, never mentioned family or friends. They didn't know that she had no family left to mention, no friends who would claim her. They definitely didn't know she was a werewolf. "Cross, incoming trauma in Bay 3. Dr. Martinez called out, his voice cutting through the usual emergency room chaos. "Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding. You're with me." Val nodded, grabbing her supplies. This was her element, the controlled chaos of emergency medicine, where her steady hands and keen instincts saved lives, where she could be useful without being questioned, valued without being judged. The ambulance doors burst open, paramedics wheeling in a stretcher. Val's breath caught in her throat as an overwhelming scent hit her. Pine, leather, and something wild that made her wolf stir for the first time in months. Blood masked most of it, but underneath, 28-year-old male, found unconscious. The paramedic reported. Multiple claw marks across the torso, significant blood loss. Vitals are weak, but stable. Val's training kicked in, pushing down the instinctive recognition clawing at her chest. Professional first, everything else buried deep. She helped transfer the patient to the hospital bed, immediately beginning assessment. The man was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair matted with blood and dirt. And then she saw his face. Zane Phoenix, alpha of the Phoenix Pack. The one wolf in the entire supernatural community who had made Ethan Gray's life miserable for years through territorial disputes and strategic alliances. The one alpha whose very existence had driven her ex-mate to fits of rage during their brief, disastrous courtship. "What's his condition?" Dr. Martinez demanded, pulling on gloves. Val forced her voice to remain steady. Deep lacerations across the chest and abdomen. Claw marks. Definitely animal attack. Pulses thready but present, blood pressure dropping. She paused, studying the wounds more carefully. These weren't random animal attacks. They were deliberate, calculated, hunter work. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away his bloodied shirt to expose the full extent of his injuries. The mark of an alpha was there. The subtle shift in musculature that spoke of supernatural strength. The faint scars that told stories of battles fought and won. But these new wounds were severe, potentially fatal. "Prep for surgery," Dr. Martinez ordered. "This is going to be touch and go." As they worked, Val found herself studying Zane's unconscious form. She'd heard stories about him, how he'd taken over the Phoenix Pack at 16 after his parents were killed, how he'd expanded their territory through strategic alliances rather than brutal conquest, how he'd never taken a mate despite being one of the most powerful alphas in the region. She'd also heard that he despised Ethan Gray, with a passion that bordered on obsession. "His vitals are stabilizing," she reported, monitoring the machines. Whatever had attacked him had been thorough, but not quite thorough enough. He was a fighter. That much was clear from the way his body refused to give up even in unconsciousness. 4 hours later, they emerged from surgery. Zane Phoenix would live, though recovery would be long and painful. The hunter attack had been vicious, designed to look like an animal mauling while targeting vital organs with surgical precision. "Hell of a job tonight, Cross, Dr. Bus," Martinez said, stripping off his surgical gown. "You saved that man's life. Your instincts in there were incredible." Val nodded, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. "Just doing my job, doctor." But as she prepared to leave his room, something made her pause. Call it instinct, call it foolish curiosity. She found herself checking his chart one more time, adjusting his IV, ensuring his positioning was optimal for healing. Her hand brushed against his as she checked his pulse, and electricity shot through her system like lightning. Not the mild static of normal contact, but something deeper, more primal. Her wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly lifted its head with interest. Zane's eyes snapped open, golden and alert despite the sedation. His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her step back, heart pounding. "You," he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube but carrying unmistakable authority. "I know your scent." Val's blood turned to ice. She pulled her hand away, but his fingers caught her wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd just survived major surgery. "You're Ethan Gray's cast-off," he continued, his golden eyes never leaving hers. "The one who disappeared 3 years ago. Valentina Cross." The way he said her name made her shiver. Not with fear, exactly, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. Interest. Something that felt terrifyingly close to hunger. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to keep her voice professional. "You need to rest." The sedation has no effect on alphas," he interrupted, sitting up despite the fresh stitches. "And you didn't answer my question. Why did you save me?" Val forced herself to meet his gaze, channeling every ounce of the strength that had gotten her through Ethan's rejection, through the loss of her pack, through 3 years of exile. "Because it's my job to save lives. Nothing more." Zane studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not dismissal, as she'd expected, but curiosity. "Calculation. Liar," he said finally, but without malice. "You recognized me the moment they wheeled me in. You knew exactly who I was, what I was, and you saved me anyway." Before she could respond, he released her wrist, settling back against the pillows with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Interesting choice, little wolf. Very interesting indeed." Val fled. Chapter 2. Sparks of Defiance. The sterile hospital room felt charged with electricity as Zane Phoenix's piercing golden eyes locked onto Valentina Cross with unwavering intensity. Despite his grievous wounds, he sat upright, the Alpha's presence filling the space with an undeniable authority that seemed to ripple through the air. Whatever haze had dulled his senses was shattered the moment their gazes met. "You," Zane breathed, voice rough from disuse yet clipped with command. "I remember you. The wolf who vanished, the one who walked away from her fate." Valentina's heart hammered against her ribs, a mix of dread and defiance stirring within her. She met his gaze with steadfast resolve. "You don't know me. I'm not who you think I am. I'm just a nurse doing her job." His jaw tightened as a shadow flickered across his otherwise impassive face. "Nurse? A wolf like you? Hiding behind needle and bandage? That's a dangerous lie." His voice dropped to a low growl. "You don't run from what you are forever." The tension between them was palpable, an invisible thread taut with unspoken history and unacknowledged truths. Valentina clenched her fists, refusing to be intimidated by the Alpha who had haunted her exile. "I owe you nothing," she said, voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "Saving your life was a choice. That doesn't make me your property." Zane studied her carefully, those golden eyes narrowing. "You're braver than you look. Must be why you survived out there all this time." Valentina gave a faint, bitter smile. "Survival isn't bravery. It's necessity." Before the moment could stretch further, the door to the room creaked open. A nurse entered carrying medication trays, interrupting the fragile standoff. Zane's gaze flickered away, but never lost its intensity. He shifted on the bed, the weight of his injuries momentarily overcoming his alpha posture. "You saved me, Valentina. But that debt isn't settled. I don't intend for it to be," she said, pulling her gloves off. "I do what I can. Let's leave it at that." But Zane's voice followed her as she left the room. "You're running from more than just me. You can't hide from the pack forever." Outside the room, Valentina took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. She'd thought she was done with that world. Done with alphas and packs and claims that tore lives apart. But Zane's sudden arrival shattered her fragile peace. She shook her head, pushing back memories of her past life, of Ethan Gray's cold rejection at the claiming ceremony that had branded her an outcast. For 3 long years, She'd erased herself from the supernatural underworld, losing any connection to the pack life she had once known. Yet, here he was, powerful, relentless, an alpha who demanded a reckoning. Back in the Phoenix Pack territory, Zane paced his temporary chamber, frustration visible in the tightening of his fists. He'd been brought low by hunters, vicious, calculating enemies who sought to upset the fragile balance between packs. His survival was owed in no small part to the unlikely healer who had chosen to save him. Why save me? He murmured to himself, recalling the faint defiance in Valentina's eyes, despite her evident fear. Why risk everything? Zane knew the answer went deeper than the surface. Valentina Cross wasn't just a nurse. She was a wolf who had rejected an alpha mate, vanished from the pack, and survived against impossible odds. That made her dangerous and valuable. The door creaked open, and his closest lieutenant, Mika, entered quietly. Alpha, the hunter's tracking marks show increased activity near the city. Zane nodded grimly. Find out if any come near the hospital. I want Valentina protected at all costs. Mika hesitated. Sir, are you sure? She may not want your protection. She doesn't have a choice. Zane said sharply. She saved my life. Now I'll save hers. Valentina tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts were scattered. Every time she closed her eyes during breaks, she pictured those golden eyes, the way Zane had spoken to her like she belonged to some world of power and danger she desperately wanted to forget. Her hands trembled slightly as she washed her scrubs in the small sink in the staff room. 3 years ago, she would never have imagined an alpha would be lying in her emergency bay, saved by her hands. The hospital, normally a place of order and healing, now felt like a battleground, not just physically, but emotionally. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, indifferent to the undercurrent of supernatural politics weaving through the shadows. She thought back to the night she was rejected by Ethan Gray, the pack's rising alpha. His cold eyes and the silence that spoke volumes still haunted her. The claiming ceremony, where she was expected to bow to his status, had turned into a public dismissal. No mate bond, no future, just abandonment and silence. That night, she had sworn she would never be vulnerable again. Never let anyone claim her. But then Zane's arrival, a fierce, powerful alpha who should have been her enemy, was shaking the foundations of her carefully constructed solitude. Valentina's phone vibrated again. This time, a message from an unknown number. Trust no one. A chill ran down her spine. The warning was unmistakable. The hunters were close. Her mind raced. To whom could she turn? The packs she had left behind, like a chapter closed in her life, might now be the only people who could help. Yet, the fear of rejection and betrayal tightened its grip. Meanwhile, Zane's mind spun with strategies. Protecting Valentina wasn't just about gratitude, it was about survival. The hunters knew her value. They would use her to get to him, or worse. He summoned Mika again. Set guards around the hospital discreetly. No one fires a shot unless I order it. We can't afford to start a full-blown war. Not yet. Mika inclined his head and left to orchestrate their covert defense. Back in the hospital, Valentina finished her shift, feeling the weight of invisible eyes watching her every move. The sensation followed her home, creeping along her spine like ice water. Her small apartment felt colder than usual when she finally arrived, the air thick with silence that screamed louder than the city's nighttime bustle outside. She closed the door quietly, locking away not just the physical world, but the memories that came knocking uninvited. Her phone buzzed again. A video this time. She hesitated, but pressed play. The screen revealed a shadowy figure standing near the ruins of a pack territory. His face obscured. The voice was distorted but chillingly clear. You're being watched, Valentina. The hunters have a list. You're at the top. Her breath caught. Memories she desperately tried to lock away surged forth. The ambush on her family's pack when she was just 12. The screams. The chaos. The loss. That burning hatred from the hunters wasn't extinguished yet. The sound of footsteps startled her. She spun around to see Mika standing in the doorway, his expression cautious but firm. Alpha sent me, he said simply. You're not safe here. I don't trust anyone, Valentina said, voice barely a whisper. Mika nodded. That's understandable. But right now, your survival means the pack's survival. Their eyes locked, a silent agreement forming in the thick tension. As the night drew deeper, plans hatched quietly. Valentina realized this was just the beginning. The survival she clung to was now entangled with power, pack politics, and old wounds that refused to heal. And Zane Phoenix, a man she never expected to save, nor to fear, was at the center of it all. Outside, the wind carried faint howls, a reminder that the wild was never far, and the wolves were always waiting, to fight or to run. For Valentina, the choice was no longer hers alone. The game had begun. Chapter 3. Forced Sanctuary. The drive through the night felt endless, shadows dancing across the windshield as Mika navigated the winding mountain roads leading to Phoenix Pack territory. Valentina sat rigid in the passenger seat, her medical bag clutched in her lap like a shield. Every mile took her further from the carefully constructed life she'd built in the human world, deeper into the supernatural realm she'd sworn to leave behind. "How long have you been watching me?" she asked finally, breaking the tense silence. Mika glanced at her briefly. "Since you saved the Alpha's life. Maybe before that. Alpha Phoenix keeps tabs on interesting wolves who disappear from the grid." "Interesting," she repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "That's not how Ethan Gray described me." "Ethan Gray is an idiot," Mika said bluntly. "Any alpha who would reject a mate capable of what you did in that operating room doesn't deserve to lead a pack." Valentina stared out at the passing trees, their branches creating intricate patterns against the star-filled sky. "What I did was my job, nothing more." "Keep telling yourself that," Mika replied, but his tone wasn't mocking. "You'll figure it out eventually." The Phoenix Pack territory materialized gradually, first as increased wildlife, then as subtle markers only supernatural senses could detect. The scent of pine and earth grew stronger, mixed with something wild and untamed that made Valentina's long-dormant wolf stir restlessly. The main lodge emerged from the forest like something from a fairy tale. Massive logs and stone, multiple levels built into the hillside, warm light spilling from dozens of windows. It looked nothing like the sterile modern compound where she'd grown up. Nothing like the cold fortress Ethan had called home. "Welcome to Phoenix territory," Mika said, as they pulled up to the main entrance. "Alpha's orders. You're to be treated as an honored guest. Your safety is our top priority." Pack members emerged as they parked, but their expressions were curious rather than hostile. Valentina caught fragments of whispered conversations as she followed Mika toward the lodge. "That's her, the one who saved Alpha. She smells like healing. 3 years in the human world, can you imagine?" Inside, the lodge was warm and welcoming, all natural materials and comfortable furniture. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room, flames crackling merrily despite the summer night. It felt like a home, not just a stronghold. "Valentina." Zane's voice carried from the staircase, and she turned to see him descending slowly, still favoring his injured side. He'd changed from the hospital gown into dark jeans and a simple black shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders. Even wounded, his presence filled the room with undeniable authority. "You came," he said, something like relief flickering across his features. "I didn't have much choice," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Your lieutenant made it clear the hunters know where I live." Zane nodded grimly. "They've been tracking you for months, waiting for the right moment to strike." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, studying her carefully. "The question is why? You've been out of the supernatural world for 3 years. What makes you worth their attention now?" Before she could answer, a woman emerged from the kitchen, tall, elegant, with prematurely silver hair and intelligent green eyes. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "This must be our mysterious healer," she said warmly, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Sarah Winters, the Pack's physician. I hear I have you to thank for keeping our Alpha alive long enough for proper treatment." Valentina shook her hand, surprised by the genuine warmth in the greeting. "I just did what anyone would do," Sarah laughed. "My dear, most people wouldn't have recognized the hunter attack pattern in those wounds, much less known how to counteract their specific toxins. Your surgical technique was extraordinary. How do you know about... Valentina began, then stopped. Of course they'd reviewed her work. They probably had contacts at the hospital. We take care of our own, Zane said simply. That includes learning from those who help us. He moved closer, and Valentina caught his scent again. Pine, leather, and something uniquely him that made her pulse quicken despite her best efforts. I'm not one of yours, she said quietly. I don't belong to any pack. No, Zane agreed, his golden eyes never leaving hers. You belong to yourself. That's what makes you dangerous. Sarah cleared her throat diplomatically. Why don't I show you to your room? You must be exhausted after everything that's happened. As they climbed the stairs, Sarah kept up a gentle stream of conversation. Zane mentioned you're a surgical nurse. How long have you been working in trauma medicine? About 2 years, Valentina replied. After I changed careers, I needed something that felt meaningful. Healing is always meaningful, Sarah said softly. Especially for our kind. We heal faster than humans, but we also carry deeper wounds. They stopped at a door halfway down the hall. Sarah pushed it open to reveal a beautiful guest room with a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, and a window overlooking the forest. There are clothes in the closet that should fit, Sarah said. And if you need anything, medical supplies, books, just company, please don't hesitate to ask. We're not used to having guests, but we want you to feel comfortable. After Sarah left, Valentina sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. This morning she'd been an anonymous nurse in a human hospital. Now she was a guest in the territory of one of the most powerful alphas in the region, apparently being hunted by the same creatures who destroyed her childhood. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Come in, she called. Zane entered, carrying a tray with tea and what looked like homemade cookies. Sarah thought you might be hungry. You haven't eaten since your shift ended. He set the tray on the small table by the window, then settled into the chair across from her. This close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved to protect his healing wounds. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Protecting me, I mean. It can't just be gratitude. Zane was quiet for a long moment, studying the steam rising from his teacup. You want the truth? I think I deserve it. The hunters who attacked me weren't trying to kill me, he said finally. They were trying to take me alive. The wounds were calculated to disable, not destroy. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I think they were planning to use me as bait. Bait for what? For you, he said simply. They know about your family, Valentina. They know what happened to your pack 12 years ago. And they know you're the only survivor. The teacup slipped from her nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. That's impossible. My family wasn't special. We weren't a threat to anyone. Zane leaned forward, his voice gentle but insistent. Your father was Marcus Cross, wasn't he? Beta of the Crescent Moon Pack. She nodded numbly. The Crescent Moon Pack wasn't destroyed randomly. Zane continued. They were targeted because they refused to give the hunters information about ancient pack territories. Your father died protecting secrets that could have led to the destruction of dozens of other packs. Tears burned behind Valentina's eyes, but she blinked them back. Even if that's true, it doesn't explain why they want me. I was just a child. I don't know anything about territories or secrets. Maybe not consciously, Zane said, but you survived when no one else did. You found your way to safety across 50 miles of hostile territory. That's not luck, Valentina. That's instinct. That's knowledge passed down through bloodlines. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. You think I'm some kind of living map. I think you're stronger than you know, he said simply. And I think that's what terrifies them. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, long and mournful. The sound seemed to echo in Valentina's chest, awakening something that had been sleeping for 3 long years. What happens now? She whispered. Zane stood, moving to clean up the broken teacup with careful efficiency. Now we keep you safe. We figure out what the hunters really want. And we make sure they never get it. As he knelt to collect the ceramic shards, Valentina noticed the way he favored his left side. the slight tremor in his hands that spoke of pain barely held in check. "You should be resting," she said, kneeling beside him to help. "Those wounds need time to heal properly." Their fingers brushed as they reached for the same piece, and that electric shock ran between them again. This time, neither pulled away. "I've had worse," he said quietly, but she could hear the exhaustion beneath his alpha bravado. "No, you haven't," she replied with the confidence of someone who'd seen the wounds firsthand. "Let me check your stitches. Make sure nothing's torn." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he nodded, settling back in his chair and lifting his shirt carefully. The surgical site looked good. No signs of infection or excessive bleeding, but she could see the strain the day's activities had placed on his healing body. "You need to take it easy," she murmured, her hands gentle as she examined the wounds. "No more dramatic rescues for at least a week." "Are you giving me medical orders?" he asked, and she could hear the amusement in his voice. "I'm giving you common sense," she replied. "Something alphas seem to be chronically short on." He laughed, a real laugh, not the careful political sounds she'd heard from other pack leaders. "Fair enough. I'll try to behave myself." As she finished her examination, Valentina became aware of how intimate the moment had become. Her hands on his skin, his scent surrounding her, the quiet intensity of his gaze watching her work. She pulled back quickly, but not before she saw something shift in his expression, something that looked dangerously close to hunger. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. I know this isn't the life you chose." "No," she agreed, "but maybe it's the life I need." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Outside, the forest sounds continued their nightly symphony, but inside the room, something had changed. Something that felt like the first tentative step toward a future neither of them had planned, but both were beginning to want. Chapter 4. Dangerous Desires. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Phoenix Pack Lodge, casting warm golden light across the spacious kitchen where Valentina found herself surprisingly at ease. 3 days had passed since her arrival, and the rhythm of pack life was slowly becoming familiar. The early morning training sessions she could hear from her window, the communal meals where conversation flowed easily, the sense of belonging she'd almost forgotten existed. She was helping Sarah prepare breakfast when Zane entered, fresh from his morning run. Despite the doctor's orders for rest, he'd been pushing himself harder each day, testing the limits of his healing body. The sight of him in running clothes, dark athletic shorts and a moisture-wicked shirt that clung to his muscled frame, sent an unwelcome surge of awareness through her system. "You're supposed to be taking it easy," she said, without looking up from the eggs she was scrambling. "Good morning to you too," Zane replied, amusement clear in his voice. "And I was taking it easy. I only ran 5 miles instead of my usual 10. Sarah laughed from where she was setting the table. "That's not what taking it easy means, and you know it." Zane moved to the coffee maker, his presence suddenly much too close in the kitchen space. Valentina found herself hyper-aware of his scent, clean sweat mixed with pine, and that indefinable something that was purely him. When he reached over her for a mug, his arm brushed against her shoulder, and she had to suppress a shiver. "Your surgical sites looked good yesterday," she said, forcing her voice to remain professional. "But if you keep pushing yourself like this, you're going to set back your recovery. Worried about me?" he asked, settling against the counter beside her with his coffee. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. Valentina concentrated on transferring the eggs to a serving dish, acutely aware of his golden eyes watching her every movement. "I'm worried about having to explain to your pack why their alpha collapsed from overexertion," she replied carefully. "Liar," he said softly, but without malice. "You're worried about me. Just me." Before she could respond, Mika entered the kitchen with several other pack members, effectively ending the moment. But as they gathered around the large wooden table for breakfast, Valentina found herself stealing glances at Zane, noting the way he interacted with his pack, firm when necessary, but with an underlying warmth that spoke of genuine care for those under his protection. "Alpha," one of the younger wolves said. The perimeter scouts reported unusual scents near the eastern border. Could be hunters. Zane's demeanor shifted instantly, the casual morning atmosphere replaced by sharp focus. How fresh. Less than 6 hours, came the reply. They didn't cross into our territory, but they were definitely surveying our defenses. Valentina felt a chill run down her spine. The hunters were getting bolder, coming closer to packed territories in broad daylight. She caught Zane's eye across the table and saw her own concern reflected in his gaze. "Double the patrols," he ordered, "and I want to know the moment they show up again." The rest of breakfast passed with discussion of patrol schedules and security measures. Valentina found herself oddly comforted by the pack's easy competence, the way they worked together as a seamless unit to protect their territory and each other. After the others had dispersed to their various duties, Zane lingered at the table. "I need to inspect the eastern border today," he said. "Will you come with me? Is that wise?" Valentina asked. "If the hunters are watching—" "They're watching anyway," he interrupted, "and I'd rather have you where I can see you than worry about what's happening while I'm gone." There was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully. Beneath the alpha authority, she caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like vulnerability. "You think they're here for me specifically," she said. "I think you're the reason they're getting bolder," he admitted. "Your presence here has changed the game." An hour later, they were walking the forest paths that marked the eastern edge of Phoenix territory. Zane moved with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in the wilderness, while Valentina found herself marveling at how different this felt from her sterile hospital environment. "Tell me about your family," Zane said as they paused at a scenic overlook. "The real story, not just what's in the official reports." Valentina was quiet for a long moment, watching clouds drift across the valley below. "My parents were good people," she said finally. "My father was Beta of the Crescent Moon Pack, but he could have been Alpha if he'd wanted it. He preferred supporting others to leading them. And your mother? She was the Pack's primary healer, not just medical training. She had this intuitive sense about herbs, about what bodies needed to heal." Valentina smiled sadly. "She used to say that healing was as much about listening as it was about medicine." Zane moved closer, settling beside her on the fallen log where she sat. "You have her gift. I have her training," Valentina corrected. "Whatever gift she had died with her." "I don't think so," he said quietly. "I've watched you work, remember? What you did in that hospital wasn't just training. It was instinct. Connection." The conversation was interrupted by a subtle shift in the forest sounds. Birds falling silent, small animals going still. Zane was on his feet instantly, every sense alert. "We need to move," he said urgently. "Now." They'd barely made it 50 yards when the first hunter emerged from the undergrowth. Tall, armed with weapons designed specifically for supernatural beings, and clearly tracking their scent. 3 more materialized from different directions, effectively surrounding them. "The Phoenix Alpha and his little lost wolf," one of them called out. "How convenient to find you both together." Zane stepped protectively in front of Valentina, but she could see the calculation in his eyes. 4 hunters, weapons designed to cause maximum damage to shifters, and him still not fully healed from the last encounter. "What do you want?" he demanded. "The girl," the lead hunter replied simply. "Hand her over and we'll let you walk away." "Not happening," Zane growled, and Valentina could sense his wolf rising, preparing for a fight that might get them both killed. "Zane," she said quietly, placing a hand on his arm, "there are too many of them. You're still healing. I'm not letting them take you," he said fiercely. "Not while I'm alive to prevent it." Something in his tone made her chest tighten with emotion she wasn't ready to name. This man, this Alpha who barely knew her, was prepared to die protecting her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "How touching," the hunter said mockingly. "But we all know how this ends. The girl comes with us, or everyone she cares about dies. Starting with you, Alpha." That's when Valentina made her decision. Before Zane could stop her, she stepped out from behind him, hands raised in surrender. "I'll come with you," she said clearly, "but only if you swear to leave the pack alone." "Valentina, no," Zane snarled, reaching for her. She evaded his grasp, keeping her eyes on the hunters. "Do we have a deal?" The lead hunter smiled coldly. "We have a deal." But as he stepped forward to claim his prize, Zane exploded into motion. The partial shift was instantaneous, claws extending, strength and speed superhuman as he launched himself at the nearest hunter. The element of surprise was on their side, but barely. The fight was vicious and desperate, Zane moving with lethal efficiency despite his healing wounds. But there were 4 of them, and they were prepared for shifter tactics. Valentina found herself pressed back against a tree, watching in horror as Zane took hit after hit from weapons designed to cause him maximum pain. When one of the hunters raised a crossbow aimed directly at his heart, something inside her snapped. "Stop!" she screamed, and somehow, impossibly, power flowed out of her. Not supernatural power, but something else. Authority. Command. The absolute conviction that she would not watch this man die for her. The momentary distraction was all Zane needed. He dispatched the crossbow-wielding hunter with ruthless efficiency, then turned to face the others. But more hunters were coming. Valentina could hear them through the trees, converging on their location. "This way," Zane said urgently, grabbing her hand. They ran through the forest, his knowledge of the territory the only thing keeping them ahead of their pursuers. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard, they were deep in Phoenix territory near a small clearing with a hidden cave entrance. "Emergency shelter," Zane explained, pulling her inside. "We'll be safe here until backup arrives." In the dim light of the cave, Valentina could see the damage the fight had done. Fresh blood stained his shirt, and he was favoring his left side more than ever. "Let me look at those wounds," she said, moving toward him. "They'll heal," he said dismissively. "Not if you keep pushing yourself like this," she replied firmly. "Sit down and let me help you." As she examined the new injuries, her hands gentle on his skin, the intensity of what had just happened hit her fully. He could have died. He would have died, protecting her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for someone like me?" Zane caught her hands in his, stilling their movement. "Someone like you?" he repeated. "Valentina, you're incredible. Strong, compassionate, brave beyond measure. Any alpha would be honored to have you by his side." "Ethan didn't think so," she said bitterly. "Ethan is a fool," Zane said fiercely. "And if he couldn't see what he had, that's his loss." The cave seemed smaller suddenly, the space between them charged with unspoken desire. Valentina found herself studying his face. The strong jaw, the golden eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses, the mouth that was dangerously close to hers. "Zane," she whispered. Not sure if it was a warning or an invitation. "I know," he said softly. "I know this is complicated. I know you're not ready, but I need you to know. What I feel for you isn't gratitude. It isn't obligation. It's—" "What?" she breathed. "It's everything," he admitted. "You're everything." The admission hung between them, raw and honest, and terrifying in its intensity. Valentina felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling, 3 years of protective isolation dissolving under the heat of his gaze. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and when their lips met, it was like coming home and catching fire all at once. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as she responded with equal hunger. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Zane rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he whispered. "I know," she replied. "I'm terrified." "Of me?" "Of this," she admitted. "Of caring about someone again. Of the hunters getting to you because of me." Zane cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Let me worry about the hunters. Let me worry about protecting what matters." "And what matters?" she asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "You," he said simply. "You matter, Valentina. To me, to this pack, to the future we could build together." Outside the cave, she could hear the sounds of the Phoenix Pack search party finally arriving, calling out to their alpha. But inside their small sanctuary, surrounded by rock and shadow and the promise of something beautiful and dangerous, Valentina allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that she might finally have found where she belonged. The future was uncertain, the dangers real and immediate. But for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't facing them alone. And that made all the difference. Chapter 5. Shattered Trust. The Phoenix Pack Lodge felt different when they returned 3 days later. What had once seemed like a sanctuary now felt like a target, every shadow potentially concealing enemies, every sound outside possibly signaling danger. Valentina sat in the main room, watching Zane pace before the massive stone fireplace, his movements sharp with barely contained frustration. 17 hunters, he said, addressing the assembled pack members. That's the largest coordinated force we've seen in decades. They're not just hunting anymore. They're preparing for war. Mika stepped forward from where he'd been studying a map spread across the dining table. Alpha, the scouting reports show similar buildups near Greypack territory and the Silverwood border. Whatever they're planning, it's not just about us. It's about her, Zane said grimly, his golden eyes finding Valentina across the room. They want her badly enough to risk open conflict with multiple packs. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Valentina's shoulders. 3 days ago, she'd thought her biggest problem was navigating her growing feelings for Zane. Now she was apparently the catalyst for a supernatural war that could devastate the entire region. Maybe I should leave, she said quietly. If my presence here is putting everyone at risk. No. Zane's voice cut through the room like a blade. You're under pack protection. That means something. Before she could respond, the lodge's main door burst open. The scent hit her first. Familiar but unwelcome, bringing with it a flood of painful memories. Ethan Gray strode into the room as if he owned it, flanked by 2 of his pack members, his dark eyes immediately finding her. Hello, Valentina, he said, his voice carrying that same cold authority that had devastated her 3 years ago. You're a difficult woman to find. Zane moved between them instantly, his body language screaming territorial aggression. You're not welcome here, Gray. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm not here for pack politics, Phoenix. I'm here for her. He nodded toward Valentina. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss, Valentina said, standing on unsteady legs. Seeing him again brought back every moment of humiliation, every second of that awful rejection ceremony that had destroyed her world. On the contrary, Ethan replied smoothly, we have everything to discuss. The hunters, your family's history, the real reason I rejected you 3 years ago. The last statement hit the room like a bomb. Valentina felt the blood drain from her face as she stared at the man who had crushed her spirit so completely. The real reason? She whispered. Ethan's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the wolf who had once courted her, who had made her believe in forever. I never wanted to reject you, Val, but they made it clear what would happen if I didn't. Who made it clear? Zane demanded, stepping forward aggressively. The hunters, Ethan said simply. They came to me a week before our claiming ceremony. Showed me photos of what they'd done to the Crescent Moon Pack. Told me they'd do the same to every Grey Pack member if I mated with Marcus Cross's daughter. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Valentina gripped the back of a chair to steady herself as the implications hit her. You're lying. I wish I were, Ethan said quietly. They knew about your bloodline, about what your family died protecting. They made it clear that anyone who allied themselves with you would share their fate. So you chose to publicly humiliate me instead of trusting me with the truth. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, 3 years of buried pain giving them razor edges. Ethan flinched. I was trying to protect you, and my pack. I thought if I rejected you convincingly enough, you'd be safe. They'd leave you alone. Well, that worked out brilliantly, Zane snarled. She's been running for 3 years, and now they're mobilizing small armies to capture her. Because you brought her back into pack territory, Ethan shot back. She was safe in the human world until you decided to play hero. The 2 alphas faced each other across the room, dominance radiating from both in waves that made the air thick with tension. Valentina felt like she was drowning in the weight of revelations and conflicting emotions. Stop, she said quietly, then louder when they ignored her. Stop! Both of you! The authority in her voice surprised everyone, including herself. Both alphas turned to look at her, and she saw something shift in their expressions, recognition of strength they hadn't expected. You want to know the truth? She continued, her voice steadying as anger replaced shock. The truth is that you both lied to me. Ethan, You chose to break my heart instead of trusting me with dangerous information. And Zane, she turned those fierce eyes on him. You've known from the beginning that I was bait, haven't you? That protecting me would draw the hunters out. Zane's face went carefully blank, which was answer enough. I saved your life, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I trusted you. I was starting to care about you. And all along, you were using me as a weapon against your enemies. Valentina, it's not like that, Zane started. Isn't it? She interrupted. Tell me honestly, when you brought me here, was it just to protect me? Or did you see an opportunity to force a confrontation with the hunters on your terms? The silence stretched painfully. Around them, pack members shifted uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of emotions too intense for public consumption. Both, Zane admitted finally. It was both, but that doesn't mean my feelings aren't real. The confession hit her like a physical blow. She'd known, deep down, that the situation was too convenient, too perfectly orchestrated. But hearing him admit it felt like another rejection, another betrayal by someone she dared to trust. Get out, she whispered. Val, Ethan started. Both of you. Get out. Leave me alone. She turned and fled toward the stairs, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of their presence, their lies, their competing claims on her future. Behind her, she heard Zane's voice, low and urgent. This isn't over. In her room, Valentina sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the forest that had begun to feel like home. Everything was ruined now, poisoned by the revelation that she'd been a pawn in games she hadn't even known were being played. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Come in, she called, expecting Sarah. Instead, Ethan entered, closing the door quietly behind him. Up close, she could see the changes 3 years had wrought. New lines around his eyes, a harder edge to his jaw, the weight of leadership that hadn't been there when they were young and in love. I know you hate me, he said without preamble. You have every right to, but you need to understand the position I was in. Do I? She asked bitterly. Because from where I sit, it looks like you took the easy way out. Protect your pack by sacrificing the woman who loved you. Ethan moved closer, his scent familiar and painful. I was 22 years old, about to become alpha of a pack with 300 members. The hunters showed me photos, Val. Children torn apart. Families destroyed. They said they'd do that to everyone I cared about if I claimed you. So you chose them over me. I chose 300 innocent lives over one person, yes. His voice was steady, but she could hear the pain beneath it. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, and not a day goes by that I don't regret it. Valentina studied his face, searching for deception and finding only raw honesty. If you regret it so much, why didn't you come after me? Why didn't you try to explain? Because I thought you were safer without me, he said simply. The hunters made it clear that any contact between us would restart their threat. I had to let you go completely. And now? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Now everything's changed. They're coming for you anyway, which means my sacrifice was pointless. And seeing you again? He trailed off, shaking his head. Seeing me again what? Makes me realize what an idiot I was. He admitted. I should have fought for you. Should have found another way. Should have trusted you to be strong enough to handle the truth. The words she'd longed to hear for 3 years should have brought relief, vindication, something. Instead, they just felt empty. Too little. Too late. It doesn't matter now, she said quietly. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. Has it? Ethan moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Because when I look at you, I see the same woman I fell in love with. The same woman I should have fought the world to keep. Before she could respond, he cupped her face in his hands, leaning down to kiss her with desperate intensity. For a moment, muscle memory took over. The familiar taste of him, the way they'd once fit together perfectly, the echo of what they'd been to each other. But it felt wrong, like trying to resurrect something that had died years ago. She pulled back, breathing hard. Ethan, stop. Tell me you don't feel anything, he said urgently. Tell me there's nothing left between us. There's nothing left, she said firmly. What we had died the night you rejected me. I'm not the same person I was then. Pain flashed across his features. Because of him? Because of Phoenix? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications and accusations. Valentina thought about Zane, his protective strength, the way he'd made her feel valued and desired, the betrayal of learning she'd been as much a weapon as a woman to him. Because of me, she said finally. I'm not the broken girl who ran away 3 years ago. I'm not someone who can be saved or claimed or protected without my consent. I'm not a prize to be won or a problem to be solved. Ethan stepped back, studying her with new eyes. No, he said slowly. You're not. You're stronger than I remember. Stronger than I gave you credit for. Too little, too late, she repeated. Before Ethan could respond, the window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. Dark-clad figures poured through the opening, moving with military precision. Hunters. Somehow, they'd penetrated pack territory without triggering any alarms. Move, Ethan shouted, shifting instantly into combat mode. But there were too many of them, and they'd planned this perfectly. Tranquilizer darts took him down before he could fully shift, his body hitting the floor hard. Valentina scrambled toward the door, but more hunters blocked her path. The lead figure pulled off his helmet, revealing a scarred face and cold eyes that held no mercy. Valentina Cross, he said calmly. You've been very difficult to acquire. The pack will... she started. The pack is currently dealing with diversionary attacks on 3 different fronts, he interrupted. By the time they realize this was the real target, we'll be long gone. Rough hands grabbed her arms, but before they could drag her away, the door exploded inward. Zane stood in the doorway, partially shifted, his eyes blazing gold with fury and something that looked like panic. Let her go, he snarled. The hunter leader smiled coldly. Or what, Alpha? You'll fight us? How did that work out last time? More hunters appeared behind Zane, clearly having anticipated his arrival. But instead of engaging them, he looked directly at Valentina, and she saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For lying to you, for using you, for not being worthy of what you offered me. Zane, she started, but I'm not sorry for this. He triggered something in his hand, a small device she hadn't noticed, and suddenly the room filled with smoke and chaos. Emergency flares, she realized, designed to disorient and confuse. In the mayhem that followed, she felt strong arms grab her, pulling her toward the window. But instead of the hunter's rough grip, this touch was gentle, protective. Trust me, Zane's voice whispered in her ear. One more time, trust me. And despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, she did. They tumbled through the broken window together, rolling across the lodge's lower roof before dropping to the ground. Behind them, shouts of anger and confusion echoed from her room. This way, Zane said urgently, pulling her toward the forest. We have maybe minutes before they regroup. As they ran through the darkness, branches whipping past their faces, Valentina realized that everything had changed again. The hunters had found her despite all precautions. Ethan's revelations had rewritten her past. And Zane, complicated, lying, protective Zane, had just risked everything to save her. The game had escalated beyond anything she'd imagined, and she was still at the center of it all. But for the first time, she wasn't running alone. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Chapter 6. The Breaking Point. The cold dawn crept quietly over the dense forest as Valentina Cross and Zane Phoenix pressed deeper into the tangled wilderness. Their breaths came in sharp gasps, each inhale burning with the weight of exhaustion and pain that grounded every laboring step. Hours had stretched into an endless chase, the hunters relentless in their pursuit, employing every trap and ploy designed to corner their quarry. Zane favored his left side heavily now, the old wounds inflicted during the previous ambush reopening with every rapid movement, sending fresh waves of stabbing pain through his powerful frame. Yet the unyielding resolve blazing in his golden eyes stood as stark defiance against the weakness his body displayed. We can't stop, he growled through clenched teeth, voice rasping with bone-deep exhaustion. The moment we do, they'll have us. And if they catch you, His words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy between them. Valentina nodded solemnly, feeling the oppressive weight of responsibility settling firmly across her shoulders, like a mantle she'd never asked to wear. The hunters weren't merely pursuing her. They craved her as leverage against the packs, a living bargaining chip in a supernatural war far bigger than her own survival. The gravity of their situation was unmistakable, the margin for error vanishingly thin. She stole a glance at Zane, whose face had grown pale and drawn, betraying the relentless torture his body endured with each step. Yet those golden eyes, luminous even through his obvious pain, held a fierce determination that refused to waver even in the face of impossible odds. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," she said gently, her voice carrying the warmth and quiet strength that had become his anchor in this nightmare. "You need rest, or you might not survive what's coming." "There's no rest," he whispered, features twisted in a tortured grimace as another wave of pain shot through his wounded side. "Not while our enemies breathe down our necks." The forest around them seemed to thicken with each passing moment, ancient branches weaving together into a living fortress of shadows and whispered threats. Time had become their cruelest enemy, alongside the hunters themselves. Neither dared look back, though the faint but haunting echo of their pursuers created a chilling rhythm that followed them like the sound of approaching doom. Suddenly, they rounded a narrow bend carved by decades of erosion and emerged into a jagged clearing hewn from years of harsh weather and untamed wilderness, a dangerous landscape littered with massive stones and twisted branches that offered both peril and potential refuge. Zane stopped abruptly, his labored breathing rattling in his chest as he surveyed their options. "This is it," he declared with grim finality, pointing toward a narrow defensive position nestled between towering rock formations. "The terrain gives us advantage. We make our stand here." Valentina's senses sharpened as adrenaline spiked through her system, medical training automatically assessing their surroundings. The clearing's rugged topography could serve as their fortress. Decent sight lines, natural barriers, enough cover to maximize their chances of survival. "I'll establish a watch position," she said with steady determination, retrieving her well-stocked medical kit from her shoulder bag. Sutures, sterile bandages, antiseptics, pain medications. Her tools of healing that might mean the difference between life and death. Zane positioned himself strategically behind the largest boulder, his body shifting partially toward his wolf form as deadly claws extended in preparation for battle. Despite the obvious exhaustion etched deep into his features, his commanding presence filled the entire clearing, radiating the authority of an alpha who refused to surrender. Tense minutes crawled by like hours, the oppressive silence broken only by their synchronized breathing, and the gentle rustling of leaves stirred by an increasingly restless breeze. Then, materializing from the tree line like living nightmares, the hunters appeared, cold-eyed predators cloaked in tactical gear, their specialized weapons gleaming with lethal promise. Their leader stepped forward with predatory grace, his scarred face displaying not an ounce of mercy or hesitation. "Surrender the girl," he commanded, voice completely devoid of human warmth. "Hand her over peacefully, and your pack might live to see another sunrise." Zane's response erupted as a low, primal growl that seemed to shake the very earth beneath their feet. "Over my dead body." Without further warning, the hunters launched their coordinated assault, unleashing a precisely calculated storm of violence. Steel clashed against supernatural strength in a deadly ballet where grace meant nothing and only survival mattered. Despite the agony that lanced through him with every movement, Zane's battle-honed instincts guided each strike, each defensive maneuver, a true alpha warrior refusing to yield even 1 inch of ground. Valentina's role proved different, but equally vital to their survival. She moved fluidly between treating Zane's reopening wounds and providing tactical support, her steady voice serving as a lifeline amid the surrounding chaos. Skilled fingers worked to staunch bleeding, while urgent whispers pulled him back from the brink of collapse again and again. Each time his strength threatened to fail, she was there, patching, encouraging, demanding that he find the will to continue fighting. "You're stronger than they know," she declared with unwavering conviction during one particularly brutal exchange. Then disaster struck. A hunter's crossbow bolt sliced through the air with deadly accuracy, grazing Zane's thigh and sending him crashing to one knee. Sensing the critical shift in momentum, The hunters surged forward with vicious intent, practically tasting their victory. But Valentina's protective instincts ignited like wildfire. Without hesitation, she planted herself directly between Zane and his attackers, her eyes blazing with fierce, uncompromising courage as she faced down trained killers. "You'll have to go through me first," she declared, voice steady despite the mortal danger. The lead hunter's lips twisted into a cruel smile, malicious anticipation radiating from his companions. But before any deadly blow could fall, a thunderous battle roar shattered the tension like breaking glass. From the surrounding undergrowth, Phoenix Pack warriors exploded into view, weapons drawn and war cries piercing the morning air. The hunters hesitated for just a moment, caught completely off guard by the unexpected reinforcements. In that storm of bodies and clashing steel, Valentina seized Zane's blood-stained hand, their fingers intertwining despite the grime and gore coating both their skin. "Not today," she whispered fiercely, her voice carrying both desperate hope and absolute determination. He met her gaze directly, his golden eyes blazing with raw gratitude and emotions too deep for words. "Fight with me," he urged with tender intensity. Standing side by side, their combined strength became something greater than the sum of its parts, a unified force that swept back the hunter assault through sheer determination and perfectly synchronized combat. Each strike they delivered echoed their shared commitment, every defensive movement part of an intricate dance woven from mutual trust and desperate, growing love. But their victory demanded a terrible price. Zane absorbed another brutal impact, his body crumpling as overwhelming pain consumed his remaining reserves. Valentina's hands shook violently but never stopped moving, her own blood from a deep palm laceration mixing with his as she worked frantically to keep him conscious and fighting. Finally, faced with the full might of ambushing Phoenix Pack warriors, the surviving hunters retreated into the forest depths. But not before snarling threats of vengeance that lingered in the air like poison, even as relative peace began reclaiming the battlefield. Valentina collapsed beside Zane's prone form, cradling his dirt and blood-streaked face with trembling hands amid the scattered debris of their desperate battle. "We survived," she murmured, tears of relief and exhaustion blurring her vision. "But this war is far from over." Zane managed a weak but genuine smile, his lips brushing softly against her forehead in a gesture of infinite tenderness. "No," he whispered, his breathing shallow but certain. "This is just the beginning of something greater." The rising sun painted the horizon in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, transforming the sky into a canvas of fierce, defiant beauty. Amidst the battered remnants of their struggle, surrounded by evidence of blood spilled and courage tested, an unspoken vow crystallized between them, a sacred covenant forged in the crucible of shared danger and emerging love. Whatever darkness awaited them in the days ahead, they would face it together, and neither would ever have to face it alone again. Chapter 7. Bonds Forged. The Phoenix Pack's main hall was cloaked in the soft glow of moonlight streaming through tall windows, casting silver light over the gathered wolves. Tonight was more than a simple ritual. It was a declaration, an affirmation of unity and trust rebuilt from ashes. The gentle crackling of a fire in the hearth underscored the reverence in the air, mixing with the subtle scent of pine and burning sage that wafted through the room. Pack members of all ranks filled the hall, eyes bright, breaths held, as Alpha Zane Phoenix prepared to call the claiming ritual. Valentina stood beside him, the heavy weight of recent battles still fresh but mingled with something new, a profound sense of belonging. The nightmares still came, phantoms of rejection, betrayal, and looming danger, but tonight felt like a turning point, a reclaiming of a future she hadn't dared to imagine just weeks before. She glanced around at the faces surrounding her, warriors who had stood beside them in battle, elders who had weathered countless storms, and young wolves with hope glimmering in their eyes. Each gaze carried silent acceptance, a recognition that Valentina was more than the cast-off mate from years past. She was their Luna now, a beacon amid shadow. Zane's gaze found hers, steady and unwavering, a silent promise lighting his golden eyes. The pack fell into reverent silence when he stepped forward, his powerful voice echoing against the ancient stone walls with the authority of a born leader. Tonight, we bind not just by blood, but by choice, he proclaimed. The bond between a Luna and an Alpha is sacred, a union forged in fire and trust. Valentina Cross, your strength has saved this pack time and again, and your courage has earned you a place by my side. Choose to claim this bond, as I claim you. Valentina's heart thundered in her chest. She had always been taught that claims were expected, sometimes forced, events dictated by pack politics. Yet here it was, an offer of choice and equality from a man whose presence demanded respect. Her lips parted, breath catching in a moment suspended between past wounds and future hope. I choose you, she breathed, voice steady but soft, the words sealing a lifetime of pain, hope, and renewal. The pack erupted in unified howling, a primal chorus that seemed to make the very foundations tremble beneath their feet. Zane stepped forward, drawing a ceremonial dagger etched with ancient runes, its blade catching the moonlight with a ghostly gleam. The sound of leather straps tightening, and the rustle of fabrics blended with the rhythmic beating of drums from outside, synchronizing as if nature itself celebrated their union. With careful hands, he drew a thin line of blood from his palm, then invited Valentina to do the same. She met his steady eyes, her own trembling slightly, before pressing a small cut onto her wrist. The mingling of blood was swift, a symbol of their irrevocable bond. Let this mark us, Zane said softly, as partners, protectors, and equals. Together we lead this pack into a new era. The ceremonial marking glowed faintly for a moment, a subtle shimmer that was visible only to those attuned to shifter magic within the gathering. Valentina felt the weight of destiny settle comfortably on her shoulders, a stark difference from the crushing burden she'd carried alone for years. The pack's healer stepped forward next, offering warmth and blessings. The spiritual elder murmured ancient words, calling blessings down from the moon itself, weaving a protective shield around the newly claimed couple. The ceremony, steeped in tradition and reverence, felt both ancient and achingly personal. As the last words of the ritual hung in the air, a soft wind stirred the pendant resting against Valentina's chest, its light gleaming like a beacon of hope. Later, the celebration spilled into the moonlit courtyard. Laughter and music flowed freely, a stark contrast to the tension and danger that had filled their recent days. Valentina found herself surrounded by curious pack members, some offering congratulations, others seeking her perspective on the upcoming challenges. Conversations weaved between the festive notes of a fiddle and the deep beats of drums, while sparks from a bonfire danced upward toward the stars. Zane watched her from across the courtyard, his expression softening as he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You've changed everything, he said quietly, lifting her hand to his lips in a gesture as tender as it was commanding. Valentina smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep in her bones. Together, she replied. The following days settled into a new rhythm of cooperation and preparation. Valentina was no longer the outsider nurse, but the Luna, the heart and healer of the Phoenix Pack. She attended strategic meetings, her insights into medical care and hunter tactics valued as much as any warrior's combat plans. She also found herself navigating the complexities of pack politics, smoothing tensions and building bridges where suspicion had long thrived. Her diplomacy skills, combined with her courage under fire, earned her respect from even the most hardened pack elders. During a heated council meeting, Valentina spoke firmly, defusing a brewing conflict between younger warriors itching for revenge and elders cautious about escalating the war. We cannot win if we fight divided, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. Our strength lies in unity and strategy, not reckless fury. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring reluctant nods around the room. It was another victory, not just on the battlefield, but in hearts and minds. One afternoon, while walking through the dense pine forest surrounding their territory, Zane and Valentina found a quiet clearing bathed in dappled sunlight. They sat side by side, the air filled with the scent of earth and fresh growth. I've never had a Luna like you, Zane confessed, his voice low and sincere. Strong, compassionate, unyielding. You make me want to be better. Valentina leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the fabric of his shirt. and you make me believe in something I thought was lost forever." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the distant howl of a wolf pack, a reminder that danger still lurked on the horizon. But they faced it together now, stronger and united. A few weeks later, during a routine patrol, Valentina felt a sudden sharp pain in her abdomen that took her breath away. Zane, ever alert, immediately caught her before she could stumble. "What is it?" he demanded, concern darkening his features. I think I'm pregnant," she whispered, a mix of fear and wonder in her eyes. Zane's expression softened into something tender and full of promise. "Then this pack has a future in you." Word soon spread through the pack of the Luna's condition, reinvigorating spirits and encouraging hope during tumultuous times. The idea of new life symbolized renewal beyond the battles and betrayals. In the quiet safety of their shared quarters, Zane traced gentle circles on Valentina's stomach, whispering promises of protection and love. "Our children will grow knowing strength and kindness," he said, his voice fierce in its devotion. Valentina nodded, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "And they'll grow knowing they're loved." The coming months brought challenges, but also healing and growth. The Phoenix Pack began to thrive under their combined leadership, expanding alliances and solidifying their rule. Valentina found herself transformed, not by magic or extraordinary powers, but by belonging, love, and a future built on their mutual respect and devotion. Under the watchful gaze of a full moon, Zane whispered as he cradled her belly, "My Luna, my everything." And for the first time in a long time, Valentina truly believed it. Chapter 8. A New Dawn Rising. 6 months had quietly slipped by since the moonlit claiming ceremony that bound Valentina Cross and Alpha Zane Phoenix in an unbreakable bond of trust and love. The harsh days of relentless pursuit and near-constant threats now gave way to a tenuous peace, one carefully nurtured through strategic alliances and the strength of a united pack. The Phoenix Pack territory, once a battleground echoing with fear and danger, now buzzed with new life and hope. Valentina stood on the broad wooden veranda of the main lodge, inhaling deeply the crisp mountain air laced with the scent of pine and damp earth. Her fingers lightly rested on the gentle swell of her belly, a living symbol of resilience and renewal. This life she carried represented more than just her own survival. It was a beacon for the future, a promise that the pain and sacrifice of the past had not been in vain. Behind her, footsteps approached softly, familiar yet grounding. "You always find beauty in the smallest moments," Zane's deep voice murmured as he closed the distance. She turned to meet his steady gaze, golden eyes filled with fierce protectiveness and profound love. "Because those moments remind me what we fight for," she replied, her smile touched with both joy and solemnity. Together, they watched the pack members below, wolves training, healing, and living in a harmony previously unimaginable. The lodge itself had transformed from a fortress under siege into a vibrant home, its walls filled with laughter, purpose, and the quiet hum of a thriving community. "This is more than we dared hope," Zane said, his voice reflecting awe and gratitude. "We've built a sanctuary not only to protect, but to empower those who were lost and forgotten." Valentina squeezed his hand, a shared acknowledgement that through their trials, they had forged something extraordinary. The pack was no longer fragmented by fear and suspicion, but bound by loyalty and hope. The peaceful silence was broken by Mika's entrance, his face set serious yet hopeful. "Alpha, Luna," he greeted respectfully. "Messages have arrived from neighboring packs. They seek alliances, hoping to strengthen ties and bring stability to the region." Zane exchanged a glance with Valentina, pride warming his expression. "Our unity speaks louder than words." "We will grow, yes," Valentina added firmly, "but only on terms built with respect and mutual trust." The following days hummed with renewed purpose. Valentina threw herself into her work at the newly established infirmary, a state-of-the-art facility that melded human medical knowledge with shifter traditions. Under her mentorship, young healers learned advanced techniques, bolstering the pack's resilience and preparing for any threat that might arise. The knowledge once locked deep within her, born of years hiding among humans, now blossomed as a legacy to protect many. One late afternoon, as the golden sun dripped low and shadows stretched, Zane found Valentina gently tending to a young wolf pup nursing a tender leg wound. Her care was precise and tender, her calming voice imbued with quiet strength and compassion. "You were meant for this," Zane whispered, awe coloring his tone as he watched her. Valentina smiled softly without looking up. "I was born for this," she affirmed. "And with you beside me, I'm no longer just surviving, I'm thriving." Their partnership rippled through the pack like fresh spring waters, transforming distrust into devotion, anger into hope. As twilight deepened into night, a subtle stir from within her belly caught Valentina's attention. A gentle, unmistakable kick. Her breath stilled in wonder, and she searched Zane's face for the reflection of her emotions. "Our legacy," he said simply, awe mingling with fierce protectiveness. Word of the Luna's pregnancy spread quickly, igniting joyous celebrations that echoed for days. The pack's renewed vigor was palpable, their spirits lifted by the promise of new life and brighter days ahead. Plans unfurled to expand medical facilities, build new training grounds for warriors, and host disputed peace talks with neighboring packs, weaving a web of strength and cooperation that had once seemed impossible. In the sanctity of quiet moments, Zane and Valentina dreamt aloud of the future. Children dancing under endless skies, generations raised knowing love stronger than fear. Legacy defined not by conflict, but by unity and compassion. "They will grow up knowing strength with kindness," Zane breathed, cradling her belly with reverence. Valentina leaned gently against him, the warmth of his body a grounding force, and love deeper than any battle. Days turned into weeks, and the sense of renewal blossomed not only in the land, but in the hearts of the pack. The once precarious alliances became strongholds of mutual respect, and the Phoenix Pack began hosting gatherings where former rivals and allies came together under a banner of peace. Valentina's leadership qualities grew steadily, her unique perspective as both an insider and outsider enabling her to bridge gaps others thought unbridgeable. Her vision expanded beyond healing wounds to nurturing hope, inspiring young wolves to believe in a future unmarred by the past shadows. Evenings found her walking the perimeter with Mika, discussing strategies not only for defense but for community building, education, and sustainable growth. Each successful negotiation with neighboring packs was a whispered victory, a step toward stability in a world that had long been fraught with danger. The infirmary thrived under her guidance, expanding its reach to include a teaching sanctuary where human doctors were invited to learn about shifter biology and vice versa. It became a beacon of knowledge and healing, symbolic of the pack's commitment to progress and unity. In quieter moments, Zane and Valentina found solace in their shared dreams. They spoke of a future where their children would grow up surrounded by love rather than fear, where the mistakes of the past would be lessons etched in wisdom rather than chains of regret. One particularly serene evening, as a gentle rain pattered against the lodge's wooden beams, Zane pulled Valentina close beside the fire, their reflections flickering in the flames. "No matter what comes," he whispered, pressing a tender kiss to her temple, "we'll face it as one." Valentina smiled, heart brimming with a fierce love and unwavering determination. Together, always. The moon rose high, casting silver light over a territory bathed not just in natural beauty, but in the promise of a brighter dawn. One born from trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between two wolves destined to lead. The future remained uncertain, a tapestry of promises woven with threads of hope and shadows of past trials. Yet, in Valentina and Zane's hands, it was a tapestry ripe with possibility, ready to be embroidered with stories of courage, loyalty, and love. As the seasons cycled through their endless rhythm, the Phoenix Pack not only survived but thrived, their legend whispered in awe and respect by distant clans. And at the heart of it all, a Luna and her alpha stood steadfast, symbols of resilience, unity, and the transformative power of acceptance. In the quiet moments before dawn, As the first light brushed the horizon, Valentina found herself watching the sunrise with a renewed heart. The scars of rejection and betrayal had faded, replaced by the vibrant colors of belonging and purpose. With Zane by her side, every challenge was met with unwavering strength, every victory shared with humble gratitude. Their love story was far from simple, far from perfect, but it was theirs. Raw, fierce, and beautifully unbreakable. They were more than mates. They were partners, leaders, warriors of a new dawn. Together, they were unstoppable. Valentina's transformation from a rejected nurse to a powerful Luna shows us that our greatest strength comes from accepting who we truly are. But her story with Alpha Zane is just one of many waiting to be told. Somewhere out there, another broken wolf is hiding from their destiny. Another alpha is searching for their true mate. Another heart is healing from betrayal. These stories need witnesses. These journeys need companions. If this tale of second chances and fierce love spoke to your soul, our pack has countless more adventures waiting. Stories where the rejected become the chosen, where enemies become lovers, where healing conquers all wounds. Don't let these stories remain in the shadows. Subscribe to join our supernatural family and never miss another passionate tale of wolves finding their way home to love. The moon is calling and our next story awaits. Will you answer?